Episode 230, the Seth Brown average episode. This is part 3 of a 3-part Dynasty Outfield ranking. These are the post 110 guys with Dynasty League potential. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Dylan Beavers that wins you championships. That's why weeks in and weeks out. See what I did there?
There you go. Save.
Yeah, we're here to teach you stuff and live straight up OG lifestyle. So let's do this. Robbie, what's happening from the murder room tonight? Smooth operating off the start here. Not too much water, not enough bourbon. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm staring at my bottle, just waiting to crack it.
I did enjoy Roto's Ronnie roast in the Surf League chat, just going right at your crown floats. That I did appreciate that.
And the Surf League, for everyone who doesn't know, is part of the Earth League. If you are an avid fantasy baseball Twitterer, a lot of the people who do this for passion and some that do it for some cash are members of the Surf League. And that's several different leagues. Sorry, are members of the Earth League, which is several different leagues. I think it's 7, and there are 15 members in each league. So Surf is the Canadian version, and there's you name them, they're in this. And it was fun last year. It's the only redraft I'm going to be doing this year. I didn't even sign up for old TGFBI that everybody gets hard-ons over on Twitter because it just isn't competitive. And if it is competitive, that's because those people that are staying competitive have had very healthy teams. And I think the 4 years that I've done it, I have struggled with health. And then everybody, because it's a free league, blows their wad of fab, which is $1,000 fab dollars in the month of April. And by mid-May, participation and lineup changes and the fun that is supposed to be what Roto offers is not available in that league. And I just decided it wasn't worth it this year. So it also ballooned from, I think when I first joined it, to under 300. It was under 300 people. And you actually kind of needed to apply to now. It was like last year was 450 or something ridiculous like that. So anyway, Surf League, that's where it's at. And Ronnie.
I'm still waiting for my redraft team to get better.
That was the joke last year.
Yeah.
After we drafted, this isn't a dynasty. That's what we do. That's what Dingers is.
I had the injury thing, and it just I don't do a lot of the fab leagues, so I missed a couple guys because I was like $2 lower, and then I won guys later in the year, and then I just did the etiquette thing where it's like, all right, I'm not picking up guys because I'm out of this. I'm not gonna roast other teams' chances to win because I've got fab dollars left, right? So,
And the other thing too is we're dealing with the site NFBC that has some things that we kind of object to as dynasty guys. Like, you can't pick up a player if they have never appeared in an MLB game that season after the draft. Before the draft, you could just draft guys who have never had an MLB at bat. That's okay. But as soon as the draft is over, they then have to appear. And fab is only run on Sundays, which is common in some leagues, but at the same time, not all. If you're in really intense dynasty leagues, daily waivers is a thing. You stay on top of it, you are rewarded. And then 2 catchers. A 15-team league, 2 catchers, 5 outfielder, corner middle outfielder. You're basically having a 24-team league drafted. And then you got your bench guys, and it just makes it less fun and exciting for me to be on a site like that, where I can't start to look at the AAA guys and think who could be next and maybe pick 1 or 2 up because, Nick Madrigal is hurt, or some other player. You had veteran pitchers who got hurt for you last year. I had guys who I needed to break out that got hurt. So we played different styles and ended up with similar poor results.
Correct. I had the best pitching in the league for the first month, and then it just went to shambles. right?
Yeah.
They got hurt, they got injured, guys missed really significant time, and it just I had too many injured to recover through FAB. That was really the big issue. Like I could have cut aces, I had a couple of them, but that's just not how you win any fantasy format. So
And there's
there's
no
just too much.
trades. There's the other thing. The other
Yeah,
NFBC, no trades. The Surf League previously played on Fantrax before, or sorry, the Earth League previously played on Fantrax before it expanded in Surf and other people, other leagues joined in. There's one out of Texas as well. I think that was new. And then they moved it to NFBC, which I mean, whatever. We're playing on the website. We're learning. That's enough of the misery though, Ty. Let's do the other thing you do with misery is you drink.
is that what we're doing?
That's the cue, baby. That's the
Okay,
cue.
all right. A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle. That clink always makes me think of Warriors. Every time I hear it, it never
Come
fails.
out and play. Yeah.
Just
Well,
never,
you
ever
sounded bourbony tonight, Ty. What is it?
I got a good Basil Hayden. This has been a weird week in the office. It's just kind of a busy part of the year, so everyone's a little stressed, and the gray and the gloom is always part of that time of year up here in Canada. So this is just got to go with old trusty here with the Basil Hayden for me.
All right. And I am hitting up Stella Artois, my Belgian roots, of which I have none. But I still have the 6-pack that I've just been milking from Christmas. So
Nice.
I didn't have any limes to have a Corona tonight, and I didn't want to have the Mill Street Organic that I also bought at Christmas because it's just not my favorite.
Yeah.
And I can't.
I'm
do
not
the
a
crowd
huge
flow
fan. I'm not a huge
every
fan of
night.
Mill Street either. Like, it's one of those ones that I can have like one of, but I have zero interest in
That's
more
exactly
than one
what
of
it
them.
is. And
Yeah.
and I was thinking to myself, if they sponsored us, I sure would feel differently.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other part. I completely agree with that.
But Ty,
So
if you'll notice, I
yeah,
did put, if you're looking on the old Dingers spreadsheet here, I did add a new segment to the podcast, which I am very happy to be introducing. Do you see it there?
I do. Yep. What do you got?
This is the brand new joke of the podcast segment. Ty, do you know how to? I'm a chef. I do chef stuff. Do you know how to make an egg roll?
No.
You push it down a hill.
Oh, geez.
And that is a great lead into if you want to communicate with us, maybe you've got a joke for an upcoming podcast. If you think yours is better than mine, hit me up at Robbie Baseball 1, or you can find Ty at Tourney Boss, or the whole podcast at Dingers Pod on Twitter. Ty, hot news is not as good as my joke, and it's super short, like my joke. So I don't know if you want to clear the deck on it. The last one's special for you.
I appreciated that. Yeah, Will Benson, which is hard for you, leaving the the comfy confines of the Cleveland Guardians bench and moving to the, I don't know, what do you want, the
hitter friendly ballpark?
No, I was gonna say like the assembly line that is the Cincinnati Reds outfield. Right,
Oh,
you just
yeah.
kind of move down. They realize that you're faulty. You go into the bin on the side, and that's pretty much Cincinnati Reds outfielders. Khalil Lee DFA'd after some off-field issues. This just hurt. I see why you passed this off to me now, because those two hurt you real bad.
Yeah, I need a time to absorb this further.
Yeah, and I think the days of Sean Newcomb being elite are certainly over. I still think there's something here that he could still uncover. He's in the graveyard, which is the Giants. They've loved these recovery projects. So if there's a spot right now for a guy like a Newcomb to maybe come out of nowhere to show some value, I mean, it's got to be San Francisco. So at least pay attention. Just have a look, and if we see some blips, maybe take a flyer on that one. And then one hot news today that you just added is Nick Martini heading to that aforementioned Cincinnati outfield. And I think this, to me, suggests that they have a lot of fear about how long Nick Senzel is going to be out this year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Martini has an interesting one. So he's got an MLB track record that's like not terrible. But last year he went to the KBO, hit 296, 365 OBP, 461 slug, 16 dingers, 12 steals. Really good, complete player, but he's never been that at the MLB level. Although, again, like I said, been serviceable and not had a long look. But Cincinnati may very well be doing like a lot of churning and burning on that roster this year. And if Will Myers, which everybody is getting hyped up, and the closer we get to opening day, the higher it's going to go with him. If Will Myers turns out to be a dud, a poor signing, Cincinnati might be willing to move out or move on or do something quickly and just kind of see whatever they can get out of these guys. Jake Fraley is another one who people are starting to get a little bit excited about. But we're going to talk outfield with all the guys. So I'm sure we'll bump into some Cincinnati Reds as we go. And that is the topic, of course, for tonight. We are doing our dynasty rankings post 110. So we don't have these guys ranked as far as where they are outside the top 110 players. So we can kind of give you an idea of our personal like or dislike for them. We do use 5-year estimated MLB production for these rankings, which is why a lot of these guys are where they are. They either don't have 5 years left or they will not have 5 years of MLB time over the next 5 seasons. But we are using 8 different offensive categories for that, so which we hope is helping you with your points league guys, your OBP league guys, your deep league, interesting league, 6x6, 8x8s. So we are taking into account their estimated or projected, I should say, runs, RBIs, home runs, stolen base, and average. That's the standard. On top of that, we're counting their walks, we're counting the strikeouts, and we're also counting their OPS. So that said, Ty, we've got a long list of names. We're not getting into the deep dives tonight with a lot of these guys. There might be a few where we want to kind of, stake our claim to why we do or do not care about them. But I mean, if you want to start, have at it.
Yeah, let's just start right outside of guys that are kind of ranked. These are the veteran types that we did rank. We won't go through the details of the rank, but this group here were guys that were considered at least at the end of being in that 5-year, starter value window. There's guys that can exceed it. We just can't that are not in this veteran section that are predictable, right? There's some long-term prospects that have super high ends. We just don't know when they're coming. So we'll get into those a little bit after. But if we start, Nick Manziel, we just talked about is first off the hop here. This is a guy that still has the ability to create some value. He's going to get to play when he's healthy, if he's healthy. And, the thing is this, in the last couple of days, right, and what Cincinnati's done transaction-wise certainly impacts where we have him here or where I had him, because I had him a little ahead of you, Robbie. And he's just a floor guy for me, right? Nick Manziel was a floor guy when healthy. Never, ever was he ever going to exceed expectations, not since the day he was drafted.
Yeah, and he's consistently supposed to have been a guy, someone that we are excited to have. Dynasty owners are to pay the price on Nick Senzel's potential, and he was a shortstop prospect, but that was like
is it
8
safe
years ago?
Is it safe to say he went from being a Jag to a Jagoff?
Man, the sound effects, ever since you've taken them away from me. Next guy up here is Kyle Stowers with Baltimore. And he got up last year, 253 average, 306 OBP, 3 dingers. Not what we wanted to see. The average, sure, but a little bit better OBP and definitely more on the power. People had the big upside on him, so he's recoiled. And for us, he was just off the top 110, very much like Senzel. But Baltimore, as we know, is stacked, and they're stacked at AA and AAA, and bodies are going to come up, and infielders are going to turn into outfielders. And a guy like Stowers has to be consistent. He doesn't have the ability to do the Sam Hilliard, just hang out and hope it can click, for a while. Hilliard's now found himself in Atlanta because time is up in Colorado. Stowers might be a similar situation guy. Hopefully there's more left in the tank, but I'm not getting too excited. Which I'll move to the next guy so that you can take the one after. Jarren Duran with Boston could find himself in a similar situation. He also was just outside the 110. He has not been a good MLBer to this point, which a lot of these guys are like that, right? It's very difficult to make that jump. hit the ground running. The difference is that he didn't continue to get at bats through his struggles. So Duran is going to need some time with the Red Sox this year, but they brought in a bunch of veterans. So that time might be sporadic. It could be, a bit in April if he makes the club on opening day. It could be a bench role where he's getting bits and bobs of time all the way through the summer. And if they're able to either be competitive or trade without injury, Duran might be chipping away at bats all year and not really get a fair shake until 2024.
I'm not entirely sure he's not like a version of Nick Senzel. Sorry. This is a guy that, if you go back for your long-time listeners, like this was a guy I flagged as a bust, right? And there's a very obvious reason if you watch the film for me. And it was, like I said, it was just predictable. It's not to say that he can't work through it. There's lots of guys that come into the pros with a hole in their swing and fix it. But there's a hole here up and away in general that I think he's going to continue to struggle, Robbie. And the only thing that I'll say that may shift this, because that prediction was in the shift era, right, is that he might be able to cover that outside better now, knowing it's okay to roll over, right?
Okay.
Because he's the lefty with speed, like he has an out there, right? So we could see a bit of a skew for him. That's why I wanted to flag it, if not, like if he can't get that coverage, he will continue to struggle, in my opinion. So just something to watch for. Next guy on the list is an interesting one for me, because when the Angels acquired Mickey Moniak, the purpose was for him to play center field, right? They were worried about the long term of Mike Trout. I can't imagine they want to run Mike Trout out to center field for a whole lot longer, if at all. And Mickey Moniak was supposed to be the guy. When he came over, they basically said he's going to be our everyday center fielder the rest of the way. And then you look at what they did this offseason, and all of a sudden they've got a crowded lineup card. And I'm not so sure there's a pathway for Mickey Moniak in LA the way it stands right now. I still strongly believe there's a high likelihood of Joe Adell to the Marlins for a pitcher. I still think that's a very high likelihood. It just makes too much sense for both teams. And it would be an easy 1-for-1 if you look like an Edward Cabrera or even a Sixto, right? Like straight up, I think that's a very reasonable baseball trade for both teams. They're both, have room to make a move. So, I think it's one we might see here before spring or in season even at some point. But I do think it's going to cause a lot of impact on Moniak, who's a guy I still very much believe in. And as you know, Robbie, he absolutely crushed it in spring training last year. So,
anyone who's been listening long enough is aware that he crushed it last year in spring training. And we did go out of our way last year to monitor AA and AAA players of note to try to give everybody that little bit of an extra edge, which we did get, so a little bit of thanks for, because it was leading guys into those who broke out as the year went on. Another guy who kind of flew under the radar with that, but is now going to comfortably be in the starting lineup for the Rockies, is Jonathan Daza, who we did mention briefly in episode 2 as somebody who was just outside the top 110. And I think that has more to do with the fact that he doesn't do two things that are part of our weighing process here. He does not steal bases. However, he has a track record of being very good at it, including a 2017 31 stolen base season. But what happened was 2 years later, he only had 12 and he got caught 9 times. And I'm sure that was when they were like, that's enough of that. You don't need to worry about that anymore. He also doesn't hit for power, but in 2019, he did have 11. What he does do is make incredible, like, Ichiro at AAA contact. But when he came up to the bigs, he struggled. And in 19, he went from a 364 AAA average in just a tea sandwich of a time at MLB with a 206 average. I'm not letting the tea sandwich go. We're going to get into other delectables to substitute a cup of coffee in the show here. But anyway, Daza then missed all of 2020, didn't get to play. We was part of the 60-man group, but wasn't an impactful guy. And then in 2021, he stabilized himself, and he has hit 282 or higher at every level that he has played at, including 300 at bats in 2021. So I'm very comfortable with Daza for the next couple years, but it's very league dependent. So in our 8x8 tie, I picked him up in whatever round it was, 11 or 12, thinking, well, maybe I'll just need some average if I have a few guys that end up being, hacking for bombs here. but it's to balance it out. It certainly isn't somebody that I'm excited to have as far as a points league would go or anything like that. But again, OBP or average leagues, he's really going to help you there. You just have to be aware that he's going to probably not do much in the run category for you. You know, what do you have last year? 56 runs. We can call that serviceable, but 34 RBIs. So you're really getting a single tool guy, but he is a good player. It's just not for the purposes of fantasy like you would want.
Yeah, I would agree. He's just not my guy. He fits more of your like grab and go guys that you like.
Well, he's very situational, whereas other guys, I'm looking at track records and seeing, oh, is there a pitch they can't hit? With Daza, it's very much like he had a powerful season once upon a time, or not powerful. He had double-digit dingers one year. He also had 30 stolen bags one year. But since then, a lot of time has passed, and that's not the player he is anymore. He's a slap ball hitter, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you know, I would rather take the similar risk. Like you would rather go with Daza. You play the at-bats game. I would rather play the upside of Victor Robles, even though he's been painful, right? Because there's still flashes. Like we've seen it. Like it's in there. It doesn't stay for very long, but we've seen it. And even last year, there was a couple weeks where he had it going. There was a swing change last year. Like for me,
that whole thing just sounded like you were my wife talking about me. You've seen it. It's been in there. There were a couple good weeks last year.
Jesus.
Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a guy that can still get it done, unlike you. Yeah, sorry, that was too easy. But you know, I think these are the kind of guys I usually look for, Robbie. Like I see a change, right? And this happens a lot with guys developing in the minors, right? Where like you took Matt Manning, great example of a guy that I talked about, arm angle change, improvement. And he's slowly elevated out of what everyone thought was career-ending slumps. And you know, Robles made a change at the major league level last year. We saw improvement. We saw adjustments from the pitchers. Like for me, these are the windows to buy a guy like Victor Robles. Like you're not going to pay anything for him. Like he's going to be dirt cheap. And so he's had a chance to make the correction. Pitchers have adjusted. Now it's his turn to make the counter. So it's probably one of the last chances for Victor Robles in the major leagues, at least for this go. I would be willing to bet there's some value here this season, kind of like your boy who's next on the list here.
Yeah, Connor Joe. So I'm just going to hit up everybody who's walked through the Colorado system today, I guess. But Connor Joe, Rule 5 guy, kicked around for years. Now he's, you know, going to play this year, 30, turn 31 in season. He's in Pittsburgh and he's going to get some at bats. It's going to be very much like it was last year with Colorado, where they'll fit and fill him in, but he's not part of the future plan. So Connor Joe is somebody to be very cautious with. One league, like I got him in quite a few, or I had him, I should say, in quite a few leagues the last 3 years, because I was thinking there was something that was, you know, there was a possibility. So he was one of those final picks in rookie or prospect drafts because he had prospect eligibility. All of a sudden he comes up, you know, with Colorado and he's getting time and it's Colorado, you know, he's hitting okay. The value's up, but I wanted to hold it for another year, which I did last year. And he was okay. But then I noticed he was not getting playing time down the stretch and things had changed a bit on the depth chart. So prior to the Pittsburgh trade in 2 leagues, I traded him away. After the Pittsburgh trade in 1 league in particular, I thought, oh, that's going to work out better for the guy that got him now. But I'm not interested in having a guy who is very likely to lose at bats because something happened at, you know, say AAA or something like that, where that player, the organization's looking at a different player. And in the meantime, Connor Joe is on the roster. I want a guy that the organization wants on the roster, not the other way around, which is unfortunately, you know, a 30-year-old who will be 31 this year. So that's Connor Joe. Just if you're rostering him, keep in mind the likelihood of him seeing his 400 at the bat this year is very slim.
Yeah, and I think one of the next guy on the list here, Taylor Trammell, is one of the hardest guys for me to put a value on, because I think if you look at the season he had last year, it was okay, right? It really wasn't a bad season at AAA. Hit 333, OPS of 983, 5 home runs. Is still room for improvement at AAA. And then he spent some times in the pros where he wasn't as good, right? He hit 196, 686 OPS. You know, not a lot of movement on the base pass. Had 4 home runs, which is interesting and notable in just over 100 at bats, right? So this is a guy that I think could take a step forward. I think reality is if the Seattle team does what everyone's expecting them to do and is competitive and is a playoff team, for me, Taylor Tramel's got to be trade bait. I think where he's at in his career, where the depth is, and if it's not him, it's Jared Kalenic. It's one of those two probably as trade bait to make this team better at the deadline. Because the outfield for me is still weak. It's very weak here in Seattle. And for those of you Mariner fans out there that are listening, you're like, well,
Yes,
no, we got
that's me.
Teoscar. Yeah, you got Teoscar. Your outfield defense is awful immediately. Even if you have Rodriguez and a pretty good defensive outfielder in Kalenic, you still have to run Teoscar out there. If not, he's your DH, which is actually okay. But if you're expecting that defense to be great with him out there, you're going to have an eye opener.
Yeah, that one could be a little tough. The next one up is Akil Baddoo with Detroit. He'll play this year at 24. We know what happened in 2021, right? Came up, had a really good April. Everybody got all super pumped and excited. But then he finished the year with 413 at bats, and we were talking about it last year. He had all the stats that were just under the markers that everybody looks at to say he had a great breakout season or he did anything. So in our opinion, he was poised to have a breakout year, and it went the other way, and it went hard the other way. But by the end of the year, he had carved out 321 at bats between a very short stint at high A and time at AAA. And the MLB time was terrible. All of it, like the 201 at bats, nothing you are excited about outside the fact that he had 9 steals. In total last year, he had 16 steals from the year before at 18. But the OBP in AAA and the average in AAA, OBP at 380 and average at 275, leave us with the impression there is more in the Akil Baddoo tank. This was not flash in the pan, but all of Detroit last year, show me the guy outside of Eric Haas that you are happy with their performance last year on the Tigers. And like, I have missed it, because everybody else seemed to really struggle.
Jason Foley, reliever.
I was just going to say, and
we'll
he's
get to him
in the bullpen.
Yeah, when we get to the 5-out episode, he's going to be a guy we talk about.
Okay, but it's for Baddoo and for everybody out there. I had traded him away in the one league that I really was kind of like thinking he was going to be an anchor, because as he was struggling last year, my team was I was still trying to be competitive. So I made a deal that it was a sell low for me, and I tried to buy whatever the other guy was back high. And I still think long-term Baddoo's going to be an MLBer, but he didn't make the list because of what we saw last year and the fact that Detroit could very well move on with some of the other guys we'll be mentioning later on in this episode. So even though he's young, the value is low on Baddoo. He was a Rule 5 pick that hit, but the organization doesn't have anything invested in him beyond that.
I'm just going to take a break for a couple guys here.
Sure. I'll run through. This will be quick.
This is just like the greatest hits for you.
This would be like the home league roster of my dreams. The next, not counting my keepers. So Patrick Wisdom played outfield last year with the Cubs. I think it's very plausible that he will end up with outfield eligibility before the summer in pretty much all of your leagues, because David Ross is going to move him around as they're figuring out what's going on with Morel, the rest of the guys there. So have an eye out for him. This is 25 home runs, no questions asked. If Matt Mervis doesn't start the year with the Cubs, even more at bats for Wisdom out of that. And again, like the closer you get to the season, the hype around Mervis and spring training and all that crap is going to cloud judgment. Keep in mind what a veteran manager wants to do. Play his guys, right? He's not going to go through all the stats. He's not going to, figure a way out. He's going to be like, Wisdom hits bombs and we need runs. So he's going to be in, he's going to get opportunity. Dylan Moore got a 3-year extension thanks to Dipoto Magic. And I got to say, I don't know that it was a move based on ceiling. I think it has more to do with Dylan Moore being a good member of the team, an affordable guy to have around, and he's going to move around a lot. But he's coveted in your 30-team leagues. Like 2 leagues that have run off, 3 leagues, this year that I have run off seasons with auctions, free agency, whatever. Dylan Moore, when available, was not a league minimum guy in contracts league. Yeah. He's getting some of that cap space that you've got in your league. He's getting drafted in universal drafts in the first 150 picks. People think there's something in the tank. I obviously stolen bases is going to be a staple for him moving forward. But if he's able to unlock some power, we could see some good things. And then Jake Fraley, also former Mariner who moved out last year to Cincinnati, Didn't get enough time to really shine. But again, Cincinnati's weak. They got a ton of outfielders. It looks like he's ahead of them on the depth chart, so he's going to get a crack, and people are going to like him. I don't mind Jake Fraley, but I certainly wouldn't want to pencil him in as a starter in a league that I think I'm ready to win in right now.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, to be honest, I'm shocked he got as much runtime as he did last year. Like, he was okay. He had, a brief moment, but like he wasn't that much better than Victor Robles, right? And here everybody's throwing Victor Robles to the garbage bin, and he plays better defense than Fraley. So like, I'm a little kind of surprised, if I'm honest, that Fraley gets as much hype as he does. Not that Fraley's necessarily bad. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just a little surprised he got the runtime that he did. Next on the list, Miles Straw, center fielder in Cleveland. This is a guy that we talked about before we jumped on tonight, just how much overhype he got last season. Right, there was a huge run on Straw. Everyone's like, he's going to steal like 400 bases. He's fast, and this lineup is going to be contact heavy. He was okay, right? He was just okay. And when you look back and say, how did Houston give up on this guy? Because he's mediocre and they're the world champions. And so that's how you win right there. So it's a great rule for you fantasy owners. Don't get lost in these breakout guys that give you mediocre value. Right.
Well, let's look at why it was kind of silly too, right, Ty? Like, just super quick on it. Miles Straw career MLB home runs 5. Last year's 0. Right. So there's a category he's contributing nothing to. What does he do that others don't? He steals bases. Great. And that's an asset. But if you take a counting category like home runs, where the league leader could be similar to the guy who led the league in stolen bases, right? They could be in the 40s, both of them. And then you kind of trot down stolen bases. There are fewer guys stealing bases than there are guys hitting home runs. So it gives him like falsified value. But if you put both categories together and say who hit the most home runs and stole the most bases last year and make that into like a super category, that's where you're going to get a really good MLBer. And that is not Miles Straw, because his, 21 stolen bases last year, only caught once, is great, but not with a 220 average, not with a 291 OBP. He's not helping you in points leagues with that. He's not helping you in 5x5, in 8x8, in your OBP leagues. Like, that is just not a helpful fantasy guy. And his preseason like ADP was way too high. He was somewhere like just outside the top 100, I think, on previously mentioned NFBC, which is a big money site.
That I believe that to be nutty. I mean, he's a Gold Glove center fielder, right? In leagues where you play left, center, right format, and you're in a 30-team league, he's going to carry just a little bit more value than he is in the average like 5 outfielder league or whatever. But I'm with you, Robbie. This is not a huge value guy. Don't get lost in the fact that he plays good defense and that Cleveland likes him and that he's going to run out there every day. Because that's his value, is that he's in the lineup, not the other counting stats. So Adam Duvall in Boston, this is one of those ones, like Adam Duvall is kind of like the every other year guy, right? He just kind of, takes a year off, gets paid a huge amount of money, has a great year, has a bad year, gets paid, does it all over again. Like, it's kind of a routine here. It's not really consistent. This is a guy that, if you go back in our episodes, for me personally, Robbie, he just doesn't have a great floor. Good ceiling, good ceiling, right? But I stay away from these guys for that reason. He didn't have a terrible season last year. It wasn't good, but it wasn't like terrible. 12 home runs, under 300 at bats. So, full season, he's closing in on 25, right? He's not quite there, but he's close, right? The OPS probably a little bit better in a full season at bats. But, we're still only a handful of years, right? If you look across the career, like 230 average, cool. We were right on like career marks last year, overall. So, I just think there's a couple seasons in his career where he's had big home run totals, and people can't forget that. And I think if you look at the rest of the body of work, like it's very mediocre.
Yeah, he's had four big home run seasons, and that includes 16 in 2020. So that's abbreviated line. But I would offer to anyone who's thinking about Duvall, put more of an investment if it's about acquiring him into a Jake Fraley, because Fraley in limited time last year crushes him in OBP and has pretty much the exact same power in the park he's in. So it's, choose your poison on both ends here. but that's the guy that I would be going with. Of
Let me
those
ask you
two.
this, Robbie, before we move on. Like, do
Yeah.
you think it's even remotely in the world of Jake Fraley to repeat last year's OPS? Because I'm not there. Like, I would love to be wrong. I like these kind of guys that didn't get the opportunity and break out later. I'm a fan of these guys, but I
Yeah.
just don't see him as that guy for me.
I don't see him as a lead OBP. I just see him as much better than Duvall OBP. And I
That's
feel
fair.
like it's possible that Duvall hit a wall last year and won't come back from it. Whereas Fraley just, I think, hit a wall and got hurt. So we missed time.
Yeah.
Next guy up here is Nick Maton, who might be the biggest benefactor to the trade between the Phillies and Detroit, because it looks like he might be the starting third baseman. Which would be cool and certainly unexpected. And
Do you think third or second? Like, I saw him as a second baseman in Detroit, but
I think our Holy Bible website roster resource through Fangraphs has said, or has penciled him in on the depth chart as number one. I haven't checked MLB.com, but when I saw it, I was like, that's interesting. I wouldn't have pictured him there.
I just don't see the likelihood of Jonathan Scope taking second base over Maton. That just doesn't
I
make
think
a
it
whole
might
lot
be
of sense
more
to
a
me.
need at third base than it is a desire to have.
Well, but I'm
other.
saying
Now,
I think Scope at third makes more sense than Maton is what I'm getting at.
I was just going to say Matt Vierling before last year was once upon a time, I think, a third baseman. So I don't know if Detroit. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But what I'm saying, I think.
And Tyler Nevin's in the mix on that one too.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we've got an option here. Nick Maton did have outfield eligibility last year, which is why he's on the list. I just don't think he'll be there next year. However, for everybody out there who's wondering what's up, like Nick Maton came up in 2021 and sucked until he got to the show and then was serviceable. Then he went back last year into AAA and he was, very mediocre again, got called up, and he's just a league average type guy. So he's not someone you're going to be like all excited about, but if you're looking for playing time and consistency, and again, like I said, the potential for him to move around, if he starts at third base with Detroit, then he'll have multi-position eligibility. He could just be someone that helps you, whether you like him or not, and whether you like his stat line or not. League dependent, bench guy, your rebuilding team, whatever. That's kind of where I think a guy like Maton could fit in. Not as a league winner at this point, because he doesn't have the track record for any good. There's not high stolen bases or high power to bank on here. You're hoping for solid OBP. That's his calling card.
The big outfield in Detroit could be really interesting though for Maton. Like, I mean, this is they seem to be collecting a couple of these slappy guys, like between Vierling and Maton, and they've got the right-handed power. That seems to be what they're trying to collect in Detroit right now. So I think having some of these guys to offset that'll be interesting. The one thing I think is fascinating about Maton, he had 406 against fastball last year. So that's a really interesting trend. We've talked about this. And last year he was absolutely terrible against some of the off-speed pitches. So, that doesn't appear to be the longer-term trend for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to turn that one around. For me, next on the list here is McCutchen. This is a guy that has obviously had a great career. He's going back to Pittsburgh for kind of like, the Rolling Stones final tour kind of thing here.
He's going to join Santana he's getting a victory lap. Santana's getting, I think, $8 million.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really understand like the post. We're doing something here. Like, I don't know if you saw that. He was talking about how we're here to like change the game again or whatever. I forget exactly what he said, but it was like, cool, man. Like, yeah, keep reliving those days. Like, it's been a really long time. And by that, I mean, like 8 years since you received an MVP vote. So, like we're well past the days of restarting the glory days. But again, peak opportunities. He did hit 27 home runs in 2021. So, we're only 2 years removed from that. I'm not going to say it's not possible for him to have some decent numbers. He is going to hit in a very reasonable spot in that lineup. That I will say. So I think, there is some upside just on lineup position there. Just something worth noting. Ahead of him here on the list, Nick Solak is part of that glutton of Cincinnati nobodies that who knows. Nick Solak was once a guy, right? Like, I mean, and really has never been given the long stretch of like, just go figure it out. He's been like, here's a couple weeks, here's a month. It hasn't went well. I would love to see him have some success here. This is a guy that has tools, has multi positions. Like there's a lot of value that could come from a Nick Solak. I'm past it. I'm not buying on it at this point, especially because he's in Cincinnati. We've talked about that for a couple of years now. What that means for the outfield.
Yeah, it certainly isn't promising, but it's interesting that he at least moved. So the rest of the guys that we're going to mention here will definitely be able to speed up through the names now. And we're also, if you're good with it, Ty, we'll just go in groups of 5. Does that sound good?
I like it.
And then just touch on anybody we think. So Bly Madras, who kicked around a couple teams last year. We talked about him earlier this offseason when he was temporarily with Detroit. Well, now he's with Houston. So he'll play this year, 27 years old. Excuse me. He is a depth piece guy, but he's still prospect eligible, which is why I'm mentioning him here. Hedbert Perez with Milwaukee, somebody that was really exciting as soon as he came over from Dominican League, and everybody got all hyped up. Don't forget about him, right? Yes, there are other guys who have popped up ahead of him, and yes, there are 3. Is it 3? Milwaukee, yeah, there are 3 elite looking MLB outfielder or on the cusp of being MLB outfielders for the Brewers right now. But don't sleep on Perez. You know, he could have a lower value now because Churio's gone ahead. Just be kind to it here. Definitely sleeper pick that I was like all over last year. Elijah Dunham, after his fall league, I really took a deep dive, did the video, checked to see what was going on, and I liked him. He went to AAA this past year, and did quite well. And I think he could find himself in the Yankee lineup as soon as the wind changes direction and Aaron Hicks falls over. Jason Dominguez. Oh, I should have done that better. Jason Dominguez. Anyway, was also in the AFL, and he's working his way up the system, right? A lot of trade value with Dominguez, former number 1 guy in J2 class, looked like a big game changer. And then there was all this crazy video and blah, blah, blah. So we're now watching Dominguez come up, but he's not in the top 110 because we're not sure that estimated timeline. A guy like Dunham, the Yankees don't have much value into him, much invested into him. So there's no need for them to push him up unless they feel he's ready. So that's where his value kind of dips down. I had him inside my top 90 because I'm looking at the best possible scenario with that old ass Yankee outfielder or outfield core. And he gets a lot of time this year. And that's where he landed with me because I think he's going to be a good pro. But anyway, and the last guy in my first 5 here is James Wood, formerly with San Diego, now with Washington. This is like a prospect darling, right? A high school guy traded in August, and the organization has nothing but opportunity for guys like him to spend a year, 2 years before they get to that AAA cusp, and then they start knocking on the door. So they won't rush him, but he certainly will be slowly going up lists, especially the draft year 2 years ago. He was very popular with a lot of people who are like, this is the best high school outfielder in the draft. And, that's the story on James Wood.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I would take James Wood over Dominguez. That's where I'm at on this one. I know that's going to be probably mixed camps.
I don't think you're I was going to say, I don't think you're as far away now as you would have been if you had said that a year ago, because I think people want Dominguez to be human. So they're looking for other people, and Wood, it's just like a feel-good story, sort of.
Well,
they just want him to keep succeeding.
Yeah, for me, though, outside of 150 at-bats at high A, like Dominguez has not been a good minor leaguer, right? For a guy that's supposed to have prodigious power, he has 21 in 2 seasons, right? Like, and that's 2 seasons after, I forget when he signed. Like, he signed in like 19, did he not?
I will look. Is it on his note? Probably isn't. It's like the only guy I don't have the note on.
Yeah, I don't know. It was either 19 or 20, like that he signed, and everyone was like, he's God's gift to baseball. But like,
I think he was 2020 J2 class before they had the hiccup. I think he was the last of the normal summer signing guys.
Okay, well, I mean, either way, good thing they're in new Yankee Stadium because he wouldn't fit those shoulders into old Yankee Stadium hallways. And those of you that have been there know what I'm talking about there. But at the end of the day, I would take James Wood. I just think he has more upside. I think the power is going to be there for Dominguez, but the contact I think is going to suffer. I still believe that, and the data so far suggests that's the case. The one thing I'll say, I was looking at Hedbert earlier. I think this could be one of those guys that has upper minor fatigue, right? We've talked about this kind of trend of these long-term guys fading. It was 216 last year in a full season, 407 at bats, 216 at A ball. And, the previous season at A ball, kind of 169 similar. So, he's still young. He's not quite into that expiring, J2 guy yet, but Hedbert's a guy that's getting a huge amount of press, has been like the guy in the Milwaukee system for a couple years. I don't feel that way about Hedbert. I never have. I traded him in a lot of formats where I had him. I don't think he's as good as people want him to be. So if you get that offer, I would suggest making that trade. A guy next on the list, Josh Smith in Texas, had a really sneaky year last year. He was part of I forget exactly which trade he was in from the Yankees to
Joey
Texas.
Gallo trade.
Okay, Joey Gallo trade. So this is a guy that was a bit of an unsung guy for the Rangers last year. He's gritty as all get out. I love it. 307 OBP. The OPS not great. The OPS plus 63, not great. But he's slappy, has tough at bats. Could be a guy that just is sneaky in the at bats department. So if you're looking for like a super depth multi-position guy, Josh Smith's an interesting one. Could have a little bit of a step forward. Still just 25, college bat. So there's room for development still here. But in the at bats that I watched, the eye test for me says he's better than the numbers that he produced last year. So kind of a guy to watch as a breakout. And at no point is he going to be a starter, but a good depth piece for any deep league. Ahead of Ezekiel Duran, also had some time last year in Texas, probably slightly ahead of Smith in the depth chart from an ability perspective, but I think will maybe lose as a result of the flexibility that Smith offers. Duran is a third and second baseman. His slug last year was okay, creeping, and had a couple good weeks, but again, very similar, 643 OPS, 83 OPS plus. So Texas has this little bit of depth, but they brought in a couple extra bats. They brought in some things. They have some guys coming through the minors. The at bats that Duran got last year are definitely going to go to Josh Jung, barring any injuries. So if I'm a Duran owner and anybody offers you some value, I'd be hitting the exit road on that one real quick. Will Brennan is a guy that honestly I don't think is going to be as good as people want him to be. It's a guy that's getting some offseason hype right now, Robbie. We saw a really limited cup of coffee last year. OPS was great. OBP slug, both great. There's some things to get excited about. 6 home runs sorry, not 6 home runs, 1 home run in 42 at bats. Batting average was 360, but it's just one of those ones that I'm not sure, Robbie, that this is where it's going to be. It fits that scenario that I always flag. Flew through the minors, got rushed to the pros, and missed some development time. This is one of those guys that I'm scared of. Had 500 at bats last year, almost 600 at bats across AAA and the pros. Had 14 home runs. OPS was okay. So there's enough to see why people are excited, Robbie. I get it. I'm just not so sure he's going to be a starter. And I'm not so sure that he didn't skip some development time. I will say this. I think he's going to start in the minors. That I think is an absolute certainty.
Okay, well, yeah, he hasn't had a full season at any one level, but that's almost a compliment to him because he was doing so well at AA. They moved him up to AAA last year, and he kind of just kept on rolling. So
yeah,
Brennan is very controversial because of Stephen Kwan's success last year.
Yeah.
Does Cleveland just let it roll and bring Brennan up, and he's your fourth outfielder that you get into a lot of games, or do you let him go to AAA and be the next guy up when someone gets hurt?
Yep. And David Hensley's next on the list here in Houston. This is a guy that had a really, really small cup of coffee last year, had some success in limited at bats, hit a home run, 345 batting average, but again, just 30 at bats. So this is an interesting one, Robbie. We've talked about kind of the influx in Houston's outfield. We don't have a guarantee in Michael Brantley to play every game, right? We know there's some volatility in Yordan Alvarez to be in that outfield, right? They don't really want to do that. I would assume we're going to see a more permanent home at first base for him this year, right? So between
For who? Sorry,
Yordan heading over to first
no,
base.
because they signed Abreu. They signed Abreu for 3.
I agree. Like those two guys are going to be the first baseman. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't see them running Alvarez out to the outfield unless they need to, right?
Okay.
So you've got McCormick, who's probably going to take most of the games in center field, right? They could roll Tucker out
Unfortunately.
there. Yeah, I mean, I think McCormick's better than people believe. You've got Tucker out there who's obviously going to be out there every day where possible. So, I think there's room for at least one more guy, Robbie. We've talked about a handful of guys, Matovic and a few others along the way, but Hensley could find himself in that category. Just a bit of a flyer off to the dumpster pile. And probably the best guy in this group of five is Robert Hassel. In Washington, he was part of the big old Juan Soto trade. This is a guy that I think is probably a year away. I don't see Washington rushing him. So a guy
I
that's
hope
going to
not.
move it. Yeah, a guy that's for sure going to be in our top 90 next year. Like there's a little doubt on that, barring any injuries or crazy derailments of his career. But this is a guy that looks like a pro, kind of acts like a pro, is probably going to be a pro.
Yeah. The next five up that I've got here, Dalton Guthrie with Philly, had some time last year. I think he was on the World Series roster, but he wasn't on the NLCS, something like that, which is a hell of a compliment for a guy who, started the year as an afterthought. And if you look at the stat line, he doesn't have the wowie stat line that you would think of somebody who kind of came out of nowhere and was on a World Series, team, not championship, unfortunately. But anyway, I think he's going to find himself struggling for playing time this year, but I think he's, earned some respect. And if things go the way they go, he could end up becoming a semi-regular player in the outfield in Philly. And I mean, honestly, I don't have high expectations for him. Certainly a deeper league play stash because he's still rookie eligible, prospect eligible, minors eligible, however it works in your league. Another guy who was like exciting and through 2019 into 2020 and then fell off a cliff and is now he climbed his way back out is Moises Gomez with St. Louis. Power is not the issue with Gomez. I think it was conditioning was something that was a concern a few years ago with him. But anyway, it looks like he's righted the ship, and now there's a possibility we could see him in the show this year. But because we don't know for sure, he finds himself there. Esteban Florial, who's been up and back with the Yankees, I think he could just get lost in the shuffle, unfortunately. But he was a J2 guy who had a really high ceiling, and the higher up he's gotten, the more not inconsistent, but maybe just less impressive it's been going for him. Will Benson, we mentioned earlier. Try that again. This will not get edited. 3, 2, 1. Will Benson, who we mentioned earlier, now with Cincinnati, 25-year-olds, had his best pro season in 4 years last year, and then came up to the show and was overmatched. Happens, right? The K concern, which has always been what you got to watch out for him, was cut down last year. I think it was on sub 23%. The guy walks, so you don't have to worry about that. He's got good power. He can steal some bags. I hope Cincinnati's able to make it work. That would be great. It would be awesome if he was really, really good, and he's got a good park. Another guy with a good park who had one heck of a last year, 2022, was Sean Bouchard with the Rockies. Issue he's going to have is my friends, is the new Connor Joe. So do not go getting all excited about Sean Bouchard having 500 bats, having a spot. There's Charlie Blackmon, who's in that outfield, who's taking up time. There's Grichuk. There's Nolan Jones, according to Ty. There's Daza out there. So he is 5th on the pecking chart. And I think starting the year in AAA, however, we can now have eyes on him because even though he'll play this year at 27, he succeeded last year, 2017 9th round pick. So, nobody from nowhere, so to speak, but an interesting guy. This whole group could have MLB time. I think maybe the only guy that might not would be Gomez with St. Louis, just because it's so crowded. And you've heard about the crowding in the outfield there from previous episodes. So it's an interesting group. There's probably a guy in here that's going to become a regular by the end of the year. And I guess if I'm going to have to guess, I'll say it's Guthrie, and that's not because it's impressive. It's just because it works out that way.
Yeah, I think Gomez is going to start in AAA. If you look at last season, he faded in AAA, but it's really the most at-bats he's had in his career. So I think that plays a bit of a role in that fade. So I think St. Louis has obviously a good options or a good set of options in the outfield. So they're not going to rush Gomez. But I do think, I'm expecting Newbar to kind of struggle a little bit, Robbie. I think there's some potential for him to be in there and be average, but I think St. Louis might look for that better pop, and I gotta think Gomez is a guy that could pressure it. Right, Newbar's going to get every chance to play every day. Like that's just the reality.
Mhm.
So there's going to have to be a prolonged stretch because he's the center fielder today, right?
I
So
traded Newbar this morning, Ty. Funny you should mention that.
what? How did I miss that? I
I
totally missed
traded
that.
I traded
Oh,
him.
you traded. Sorry, I thought you said
I
so you
traded
boozed him.
him. No,
Oh,
no, I
I saw
traded
that.
him, and I got back one Bubba Thompson and a couple late picks in one of our leagues. I also had to give up Victor Mesa Jr. as a prospect going back, which I was happy to do so that I could pick up possibly someone else that's further down on this list that we might talk about. Well, it's not an ordered list, just they haven't been mentioned yet. Anyway.
Yeah, this is a bit of a fun section here, Robbie. You've got Alexander Canario, who had a massive 37 home run season last year, and then unfortunately absolutely destroyed his ankle and shoulder in the
2
Dominican
surgeries for the
League.
guy.
Yeah, poor guy. And honestly, those are the kind of injuries, like 2 of those stacked, like could end everything. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
like
could come back totally different player.
yeah, and so it'll be really interesting to see what we got there. Next on the list is Hype Machine in your dynasty formats, and it's only going to get worse in every other format. Drew Jones,
Drew Jones. Sorry,
is
I laughed over it. Yeah, Drew Jones. Yeah.
yeah, he's coming. I mean, he's a ball player. He's probably going to be great. He's probably going to be a superstar. This is a guy that can play. I think for me, he was the 1-1 in first year player drafts, right? This year. I think there was a lot of people that wanted to put Holiday first. I don't agree with that one. I think it was Drew Jones, but that's just the one there. Teammate of his, Jorge Barrosa, is another guy in this group, maybe less heralded, but a guy that is should be on your radar as well. As we go through Corey Julks, and last one here is Evan Carter. So Robbie, these are a couple guys that I know you like. I know you're into Julks a little bit. I believe we talked about him in the third base episode as well, right?
That's where we gave him more time because at that moment, what I was reading about him was that the possibility existed that Houston was going to move him around a bit, and I was like, wow. Well, if something happened to that side of the outfield, an injury to one of their guys, and then Julks is an option there, that's perfect. Like Matchvachik last year, first base, outfield, just tried to get him at bats. But if Julks was on the other side of that, that could be very beneficial. And we talked about him early in the offseason as well, how Houston took him out of ball to basically rework him, fix him, and they did. So they had success with him. And Evan Carter is just a high school drafted guy in 2020, I think. He was second, third round pick. Anyway, he's on all the charts now. We said it at the time. He was one of those could be the best high school guy from this class, and he's coming along nicely. But I need everybody to keep in mind, Texas has a billion freaking a billion freaking outfield prospects. They're not all going to play. They're not all going to hit when they do.
Well, and this is probably the guy that's going to get the runway, though. If you look at it, I mean, we've got Baseball America's got him 26, Baseball Prospectus 22, right? I mean, we don't take the Major League Baseball list very serious, but they have him at 41.
But people take, as we've talked about in frustrating fashion, people take the MLB top 100 prospects as near gospel for fantasy. It's not about fantasy. We have no idea who the heck writes it because they don't tell us.
Well,
but
and
people
I don't know
bank on it.
I don't know if you followed the MLB, let's call them infographics this offseason, on their Instagram channels and stuff. It's just been straight clickbait. It's just been antagonizing people, right? Like Matt Chapman off of the best third baseman list is insane, right? And I forget what the one I saw the other day. It had a couple different things that I would just cringe at, and I don't know who writes these things. I really don't. Or it's just so I don't take MLB serious because a lot of people don't know is MLB.com is a media company, right? It's a media company. It's not Major League Baseball. The .com is completely separate. It's a different business model. And MLB obviously has an affiliation with it, but it is still a media company. It's looking to drive you to their website. They want to sell you t-shirts and jerseys and all that fun stuff. So remember what their job is when you're going to that page. And don't get me wrong, everyone else wants clicks too, but they know they don't have the MLB product to sell you. So they're going to give you better advice because they want you to come back for it. So just keep that in mind. But
yeah, Jim Callis. Jim Callis is the MLB pipeline guy. I couldn't remember his name. Excellent. He goes on Prospect One with the Welsh, who's been on with us. But he's not writing anything for fantasy. He's writing for baseball. Yeah. So just I don't like being negative on it because like people reference it, but
Why not?
people reference the
But
list
that could be
and
fun. Negativity can be fun.
it's just not relevant for fantasy, but it does get weighted heavily in fantasy. So anywho, all
Yeah,
right.
but to kind of end there though, I'm into Evan Carter. I like Evan Carter. I think he's going to be a guy, and frankly, probably the fastest mover of the outfield. And guess what? With the Bayron Laura issues off the field, like that moves Carter even further up the depth chart if he wasn't already past him.
Yep. Sorry, my Fantrax screen just like went all wonky on me, trying to check out where I'm waiting to pick in a draft here. I'm just desperate to do it. Next 5 guys up for me here: Kevin Alcantara with Chicago. Oh no, I'm not good at this name. Joenski Noel with Cleveland, one of the other outfielders that they've got on the cusp. Nick Eaton with Kansas City, who we talked about him earlier. I just think he's going to, get some time this year. I think it could be really good. 2022 first round draft pick Sterling Thompson with Colorado, and then Emmanuel Rodriguez, who was a J2 guy with Minnesota. These are all guys who shouldn't, outside of Eaton, who shouldn't make impacts this year. But they could become really big fantasy assets if they aren't considered already. Alcantara has been kicking around for a long time as a J2 guy. So his value keeps on moving, everywhere because he was a Yankee once upon a time. And just caution with these guys, nothing wrong with acquiring them. Don't think you're going to see anybody outside of Eaton make a big impact this year. I don't know what Cleveland would do. They have too many outfielders, I think, that are on the cusp for a guy like Noel to come up and make noise.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think this is, if you look at Cleveland's track record, they almost never rush these sort of guys, especially when they've got placeholders ahead. So the next group here, Petey Halpin is a guy that got a ton of hype in the draft year for him. I'm still not a Petey Halpin buy-in guy yet. Like I know he's
the line's been okay. It hasn't been great. It's been okay though. Like always playing young for the age, but again, not a step forward.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's going to come down to the power because I think he's going to put the bat on it, but like we're not seeing the OPS tick up, right? Like it went down in the elevated year last year at high A, so I think you're going to see a really short stint at high A to start this year and a quick move into double A. I think that's what Petey helping, but it's going to be a big tell all year for him. Making that jump into double, we're going to need to see that. At least a tick up in power, Robbie. Like we don't need to see 30 home runs. That's not even realistic. But I want to see 10. I want to see 15. I want to see improvement from him. Anthony Garcia in New York is going to be on the Yankee hype train, right? This is just what they do with these kind of guys. They build them up. They say these are guys to watch, and then they trade them.
Well, he had a crap 2022 tie from an average perspective, but his average tie 195, his OBP 372. Fun fact. That is his worst OBP since he came stateside.
Yeah.
So Anthony Garcia could be a guy, and he also hit 14 dingers with 21 stolen bases, but contact is the issue, clearly.
Well, he's a big man. He's 6'5", 204, and that's just what they list, let alone what he probably actually is, right? So,
right.
There's a guy to watch there, but I would be careful. Like if you go back in history with the Yankees, they're really, really good at hyping these guys at the low minors, flipping them somewhere, and let him go. So, Estevan Florial, anyone? Like remember that hype train, right? So just that's the concern I would have on this one here. Parker Meadows is a guy that I think is an underappreciated 18 second round pick. Is a guy that I like to be on a lot more people's radars by the end of this season in Detroit. It's going to be confusing when the Meadows in the outfield is not Austin Meadows, right?
Yeah.
So,
and they are brothers.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, they're brothers. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's quite possible Parker could be first call up for Detroit this year, depending on how it works out. So oh my gosh, what is the older brother's name?
Austin.
Thank you. As soon as Austin gets hurt, Parker could take a spot.
They'll
never be seen in the lineup together.
Yeah, he's gonna get hurt just thinking about Parker being better than him. Like that'll cause an injury, right? But we just talked about this in terms of the guys get rushed to the pros, Robbie. Like this is a guy that for me has a better trend, right? If you look at what happened last year, high A hit 230, not a huge amount of at bats, 60 at bats, really, really light. The OPS was 813. We saw a tick of 820 at double A. Overall, the line's pretty good. 270 on the year, OPS 819, 17 bombs, 20 bombs, 20 stolen or 17 stolen bases. So a little bit of a speed power profile here, Robbie. I think we're going to see him this year. Certainly a big reason
I think
why
we're going to see him for sure.
Yeah, Detroit moved some outfielders out. They didn't really sign anybody in the outfield of note. They obviously brought in Matt Vierling. So I think they left a spot here for Parker, and I think we're going to see it. And at the worst case, they're selling pairs of Meadows jerseys, right? The double jersey giveaway, Meadows
for
2X.
I was going to say the fan base can save money if they just go from one to the other, but I don't think many people had time to buy the jersey last year
just
because Austin
like
got hurt so quick.
Yeah, I don't actually know what their numbers are, but just get a Velcro door on the jersey and you just rip off the number.
Great
and
idea.
Flip it.
That's a great idea.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Nelson Velasquez is a guy that I think is going to benefit from the Canario injury. I think we were going to see Canario this year before the injury, given what he did in the minor leagues last year. Nelson Velasquez, funny enough, had a very similar minor league profile to Canario. Medium average, huge light tower power. We saw the big breakout in the fall league. Everybody got super jacked up 2 years ago here. We're back to earth. He's still just 24, though, right? There's still upside here. This is his J2 signing many years ago. He's kind of right where he should be. And with an injury or two or a potential in-season trade or whatever happens with the Cubs this year, nobody really knows where they're going to slot in. Velasquez could be a guy. And then back into Detroit, we're with Kerry Carpenter, another guy we could see this year, Robbie, a little bit older at 25. The 19th round pick out of Virginia Polytechnic Institute, right? So this is an older bat. Had some life last year. We saw 103 at bats. Depending on how they do what they do with Parker, like this could be the placeholder till Parker gets through some contract timelines, right? That might be what we see here. It'll be really interesting to see what Detroit does with this group. But yeah, that's kind of that one. Is there anybody else in that group you want to touch on, Robbie?
No, I want to say more names, so I want to say less about them. So the next five I've got here is Alex Call with Washington, formerly of Cleveland. He is another one of those outfielders last year that Cleveland ended up getting to the pros. Now, it wasn't through Cleveland because they let him go. He basically was out of time, with Cleveland, and they did the right thing. They let him go, gave him a shot. Washington picked him up, brought him up, and he was serviceable. League average outfielder. I forget if 110-ish at bat, something like that, 5 dingers, which, just exponentially increase that. You got a guy that 20 home run potential, former 3rd round pick in 2016. So this isn't someone who didn't have a profile, who hasn't had previous success anywhere, just needed the opportunity. And with Washington, he's probably sitting somewhere around 5th on that depth chart, could make the opening day roster, could be at AAA, first guy called up. So that's a good one there. More interesting for dynasty guys out there is good old Austin Martin. Remember when he was the best player taken, best draft value when Toronto got him, and then when they dealt him, Ty, you were all over the issues that they could have with him long term. And he went from the infield to now the outfield, which is always the first failure of a player. And that's because when they're a shortstop, they should stay shortstop, especially at college when they're drafted that high. Well, now we're hoping to see, I think it was the fall league he was good in, and that was kind of saving grace for him. Kalal Lee, we already mentioned DFA. We'll find out what's going on with that. Hopefully there's a career left for a guy like this who, I think is one point in time stole 60 plus bases in pro ball. Austin Hendrick, very much like Austin Martin, but on the high school end, 2020 first round pick, went to Cincinnati, and everybody thought he was going to be the big stud of that group. It's been a slow burn for him, and we'll have to see some continued improvement.
21 bombs last year, though, Robbie. Notable.
What was the rest of the line, though? Because I know that it wasn't
210. Like the average was
210 average. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what it was. Thank you. What was his OBP if you have it? Because I did not look that up earlier, but I was checking Cincinnati guys. Was it 300 or under?
The line was for the year it was 217, OPS 739, OBP was 306. So
306. Okay, so just a hair over 300. Yeah. Okay. And then the last guy we got is Chicago Cub Pete Crow Armstrong. And again, there's a log jam there, so there's just not going to be MLB playing time likely, and that's why he is where he is.
Next on the list, Nathan Lukes in Toronto is a guy that I thought was going to break camp last year. He had a great spring, played good defense, was a left-handed bat, checked all the boxes for Toronto to move him into that lineup, and instead we rolled out like Bradley Zimmer, which cool. But Nathan Luke's the guy that's probably the least excited to see Dalton Varsho ever, because that's definitely some of the at-bats that he could have slotted into. Left-handed, play center field, a little bit of defense. We still could see Nathan Lukes this year. There's a definite George Springer injury coming. So when that happens, Nathan Lukes could replace some of those at-bats in season here. Jose Azocar is a bench bat, real speed guy. San Diego seems to really like him. They threw him out there last year. I think they're going to run him out again this year. But, you lost the Will Myers at bats, so there's some at bats here. They lost the Profar at bats. So, Azocar is probably going to be the fourth outfielder in this group, if not the fifth outfielder. So I think it's an interesting one. Wynton Bernard is a guy that got a ton of press last year, getting the call up, got a ton of media presence, long-term minor league guy. They brought him over into Toronto. He's probably just going to be a depth guy. So I don't see this one as a guy we're going to talk about, especially when Nathan Lukes is ahead of him in the chart. Like, that's the obvious call up. And then we've got guys that are kind of on the cusp on the infield between Martinez and Berger, who we've talked about. I just don't see a pathway for Bernard. I barely see a pathway for Luke. So I think that's it. Terran Vavra is a guy in Baltimore came. I forget what the trade was. Was that the Givens trade going to Colorado?
I think it was Givens, because he was an 18 draft pick. So he would have at that point have disappointed and then been moved.
Yeah, him and Tyler Nevin came over in that trade. I do remember that was the pair.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Nevin's now in Detroit.
Yeah, and I think Vavra's on the same path, right? Because your boy Ramon Urias is for sure going to take the at-bats that Vavra would want to have. It's Gunnar Henderson
forcing him to the outfield. Forcing Vavra to the outfield.
Yeah, and I think even that's a stretch, given the guys that's coming. I think Vavra's a very short window of opportunity to get some at-bats. The best thing that can happen is he finds a way onto another roster, right? Maybe he gets himself into the Lewin Diaz matrix loop, but we'll see. Justin Crawford's the last guy on this list, 17th overall pick this year in the 22 draft. So a guy that, we don't know a whole lot about yet in terms of what his production is going to be at the pro level, but first round talent, high school bat.
One thing we know about him, Ty, his dad.
Yep.
His dad.
Carl's
Crawford. Yeah. The big man, the also high school drafted fantasy darling. So already in 2 prospect drafts, he was not highly coveted. He went much later than his MLB draft, 17th. In one, he was the 53rd rookie off. I'm starting to build up my first year player draft average draft position for anybody that's interested. So basically it's real dynasty leagues where the guys are getting drafted versus where they were drafted in MLB or their J2 rank, things like that. And Crawford is sliding. So I don't know why, but he's sliding. But yeah, with his dad being one of those bloodline type guys, he seems like he could be a useful guy. But anywho, next guy up here, next 5 guys I got here is Chase DeLautner with Cleveland, to college bat, first round draft pick of Cleveland. So, I mean, why not just add on to the plethora of outfielders you already got with another one?
Robbie, how familiar are you with DeLautner? Like, absolutely
not very.
Massive college career.
Yeah. That's the only thing I know of him.
Like, listen to this college line across 3 seasons. Okay. So, 260 at bats, right? Batting average 402. 520 OBP, Robbie. 520.
Wow.
With a 1235 OPS, right?
Video game numbers right there.
Yeah. So, obviously this is, James Madison.
What was his school?
James Madison.
Oh, okay.
So he was playing in the Colonial. So, I mean, that's a bit of a lower level versus some of the super high ends. But we see these guys, right? Like, you switch sports and you go, Steph Curry went to Davidson, right? Which didn't have high level until they got to the tourney. But these are the kind of guys that you can buy low on. We talked about like a Peyton Burdick in past years, a guy that can come out. Now, this guy's a very different style because there's a little bit of pop here as well. But yeah, just something to note. I wanted to see if you knew that.
Yeah, all I did with a lot of these guys, like if I wrote down AAA college, wherever, it just basically means I looked at the line and I thought they were, somewhat relevant to mention. Benny Montgomery was another first round pick because Colorado had 2. He's a high school drafted guy, I think 20 years old. Oh, maybe that's college. Yeah. He came out of Nick Lofton. Remember him. Now he's 24. He was the first round pick, 32nd overall in 2020. He's chugging along up the organizational depth, which is now, thankfully, at the MLB level, been cleared a little bit in Kansas City. Jonathan Class, or Class A with Seattle, is a guy. He's a J2 guy, and you need to, if you see him available in your league, you need to find a way to get him on your roster. And then the other one is an older dude, Blake Sabel, who will play this year at 25. I guess he's not that old, but yet to have an MLB at bat. Went to the fall league, 55 at bats. He was, like many other people in the fall league, not great, but he's a really good OBP guy. Last year's OBP at 3 levels? It was 363. He had 10 stolen bases, 19 dingers, 280 something average, and he's just a good ball player. At AAA, it was brief, but it was also right in line with the AA. So I believe we talked about it earlier, whether it was when we were recording or not. Sometimes the biggest hurdle you see with a player is when they've jumped in season and they've just fallen flat on their face. I look to see the guys like a Sabel who can make the jump and don't fall on their face. Now, San Francisco just signed some free agents or re-signed guys that were veteran outfielders, which makes it a little bit harder for a guy like Sabel to be able to debut. But, it happens every year, right? Teams don't use 5 starters. They use 10. Yep. They don't use 3 outfielders. They use 7 or 8. So there's going to be some time if Sabel keeps rolling.
Yeah. Next in the group, Elijah Green, 5th overall pick here. This is an upside guy. I think Justin Upton is the comparable that I would throw on Elijah Green at this moment. Has that kind of upside. I don't know about maybe the speed that we saw early in Upton's career is much there, but definitely interesting. Justin Durden is a guy that had a fairly reasonable season last year, Robbie. 324 at AA in the Houston system. It dipped 242 in 128 bats at AAA. But again, a guy that could rise the charts. You could find him moving up onto a lot more radars. 25 out of East Carolina. I don't know if he was a transfer guy or how this is. Southeast Missouri.
I think he got hurt. I think he got hurt last year, Ty, because I remember looking at him before thinking, man, this is like a guy. And then I didn't see anything else from him. So it could have been someone I just randomly saw the stat line and was like, let's follow it. And then he was hurt and I didn't see any progression. I'm thinking.
No, I don't think so, because he had 550 at bats. So I'm not so sure that's
okay.
Same guy. Good season overall. I think just a guy to watch. A 4-digit OPS at AA. So anytime you see 4-digit OPS at either of double or triple, that's a guy you need to put a flag on. So that's definitely one to watch. David Calabrese, Canadian boy, Robbie, that we've talked about. I know you own him in a couple spots.
Yep, slow burn prospect.
Yeah, high school bat out of Canada, right? Like, I mean, the amount of times that's going to rocket to the top is going to be exactly 0. So, not to say that the potential's not there, but just the speed of progression is always going to be a little bit slower. Physical guys, you look at Larry Walker, like he didn't play baseball until he was an expo, right? So, there's a guy that, that could have some upside here. Grant McCrae and Christian Vaquero here, Washington and San Francisco guys. Again, we're getting into guys to look for, and these are 2 guys that fit that category, Robbie. I don't know if either of them are worth any more time on your list today.
Vaquero's just somebody who last year was like one of the top J2 guys, so people were very excited about him, and he came out and did not, destroy. And I think people were expecting that to happen. But you gotta, you gotta be okay.
16-year-old being great, like, come on.
Yeah. And then in 2019, Grant McCrae was drafted in the 3rd round. I'm just adding that in here because I didn't have it in the notes before. And last year with A and high A, mostly let's just go with A, 383 OBP, 291 average, 21 dingers, 35 stolen bases. So, circle the man on the calendar, right? He deserves a look. He's also going to play this year at 22 and most likely start at high A. I'm assuming we'll have another quick promotion. So that's a good player just to have that is not at all discussed as far as like dynasty sneakers. That also might fit the San Francisco timeline a little better with some of the multi-year contracts that they got in the outfield. Next 5 up I got here, Luis Rodriguez with the Dodgers. He's a J2 guy from 2019. He's just slowly getting better. Every year he's going to move up the list. This might be the year we start to see him more widely on. He had a good year last year. Adam Hall, we've talked too much about him, really. He's fine. At some point he should get a shot. He could unfortunately be like a Dwight Smith Jr. type guy where they just don't fail, but don't get opportunity. We'll see. There's still should be opportunity for a guy like Hall left because he hasn't sucked, but he has been buried and had injury issues. Eric Pena, remember him?
Yeah.
2019 J2 class. That's the same
Yeah.
year that Jason Dominguez signed. Just so everybody remembers.
You really gotta start working on that.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, was it last year or 2 years? Whenever it was,
Serious.
I do other. Yeah,
I've blocked it out, and I'm so happy about it.
yeah.
I don't remember when.
I've done other things since then. Anyway, Dominguez is, or sorry, Dominguez Pena is just straight timeline relevant here. He'll be 20 all of 2023 season. So that's, let's be realistic. He's not getting a lot of time. He's not going to be up as 21-year-old. George Valera with Cleveland, who's 22 right now, was from the 2017 J2 class. He's steadily been rising. I think he's pretty high up on the Cleveland depth chart, and I think we'll see him this year. But again, like we talked about with some of the other guys in Cleveland, it's crowded, and it's not crowded with crap. It's crowded with guys that they are, the perfect Cleveland Guardian. They are young, they are cost controlled, and they don't need to go anywhere, right? They have one guy that's on a major league contract with any dollars, and that's Miles Straw. So Valera's kind of blocked. And then another one's J2 guy from last year, Tony Blanco Jr. with Pittsburgh. He was fine last year, which was important because there's a lot of guys who, once they hit, pro ball, come over from the DSL, go to complex, whatever, get taken advantage of. And Blanco was okay. We want to see him come over this year and do good things. But keep an eye on that 17-year-old.
I think for me, Valera, like the power is ready. Like the outfield ability is probably there. It's just hit tool. I think that's just what we're looking for in the spring. Like that's what I really want to watch, Robbie. I want to see how he does against some pros. Actually, he's probably gonna be hurt during spring. I take that back. That's what I'm looking for, though. I want to see the hit tool improvement. So it's gonna be probably post spring, I believe. But a guy that I want to see that steady improvement, and we have seen it through the minors. There was a little bit of a dip at AAA last year, but I think that's just to be expected to some level. This next group here, Robbie, as we get into it, Dylan Beavers, Zach Deloach, Drew Gilbert, Cole Freeman, and Y. Antuna, who we talked about. Yazel Antuna has fallen off a cliff as a guy that was coming out of 2020, was on a lot of radars to break camp with the Nationals in 21, and we've seen the complete opposite out of him since then. He's moved off my charts, Robbie, as a guy that I once was very, very excited about, and I've seen him going completely backwards on that front. Drew Gilbert is another guy in this group in that Astros farm. There's a bit of a slow progression to college bat out of Tennessee, so good program. But last year in limited at bats, we saw.
Well, that was his draft year, Ty. Last year was his draft year.
Agreed. Yeah. So limited bats, 32, 313. So we saw a couple bombs, two. Again, not enough of a sample to say yay, nay, or anywhere in between. But a guy with first round upside, went to a good school. So there's a lot here to get excited about. Dylan Beavers is the other one that kind of fits that category. He got the mention off the intro there. But this is a guy that I believe was an Oregon guy. Robbie, correct me if I'm wrong there.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, he was Cal. My bad. I knew he was Pac, but I didn't. Yeah, he was Cal. So again, last year was also his draft year. We did see a little bit more from him in the at-bats total. And definitely for me, Robbie, I don't know about you, probably exceeded those expectations. I think the one thing that's really interesting is almost no power, right? Whereas his college year, 17 home runs and 18 the previous year in his last two college years. So I think now it might be an interesting time to buy low on a Dylan Beavers, just because you can play the no power game. Somebody might be like, oh, I thought he was going to hit more home runs. If you offer something reasonable, you might be able to get a bit of a sneaky acquisition on that one, Robbie. But beyond that, that's kind of it for me in that group.
Yeah, Cole Freeman is somebody that I was kind of watching when he got drafted, after he got drafted and played, I think 2 years. So 2019, he came on my radar, but he was released last year after Ty, which I don't understand. So we know Washington sucks, right? So they clear guys out. He's hurt. They release him after they gave him his first taste of AAA, in which he was fine. He was a 299 hitter, had a couple home runs, stole 15 bases in 144 at bats. They're like, you know what? We can do better than you for some reason. So then he went to indie ball. I wonder if he might come back with another team like we've seen some other guys do. So just like keep an eye. Again, these are not like the top, 150 or whatever. These are just guys to have a note for because they're now going to be of no fantasy value in the league. So I just
You
have a soft spot for him because I've been following him.
just like your soft spot for Jake Slaughter.
Did I get him?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Oh, so this
Live
is a
live
24
autograph.
team.
Yeah.
Yeah, 24 team league. We talked about Slaughter before as one of those wiser wisdom guys. He's on the roster now of Depoto's Mariners.
Ugh,
Anyway,
gross.
so next guy's up for me here, Judd Fabian, catcher turned center fielder, college bat with Baltimore now, to joining that great depth. Nico Holsizer with Tampa Bay, who we kind of found last year, and he had a great power year this past year, but he is not good for the average. So he is your OBP and or points league type guy. And again, deep down in Tampa Bay system. I guess I didn't say the Rays off the top. Kansas City's newest outfielder, drafted first round, 9th overall, Gavin Cross, college bat. We should see a quick rise for him. It's just a matter of, will it be a quick rise like he goes to high A this year and then moves to double A, or will he do the A high A thing? We'll have to see, because he's 22. He should be moving quick. Miguel Blias with Boston, 19-year-old J2 class 2021. Everybody's excited about him. Let's see what he can do if he comes over this year or he just repeats at the Dominican Summer League. Another guy, Jackson Churio's brother, who was traded from somebody to Cleveland. I can't remember that deal, but it doesn't matter yet. He was J2 class last year. Yeah, J2 class last year, and then traded. So he's probably going to be back in the DSL unless he comes over. But just the hype because of his brother is going to provide him with fantasy value. And I've seen him take it in leagues already, which is totally fine and fair because there's, value to that. But of course, it's going to be the guy in your league that is all about the perceived value, fantasy value of a player, more so than the guy who's winning championships. So maybe like your avid traders, a guy who's going to want Churio, because that's a fun, exciting thing to have right now. But he could definitely be a guy, but it is years away. So it's really just going to be fantasy trade value that gets him any play in your big leagues now.
Definitely. We're getting near the last group here, Robbie. So we'll kind of run through this section here. But Reese Hines, who we've talked about previously, Isaiah Green in Cleveland came over in the Carlos Carrasco trade as one of the big pieces there. High school bat that's still developing. So just somebody to watch. Jonathan Rodriguez is probably the most interesting one here in this group, Robbie. Huge breakout year last year on the power side. I think it was 26 was the total for the year. The OPS 858 again. So we want to see a improvement on the BA and the OBP a little bit, but we like what we see here. This is a guy to watch. 74 bombs, right? So, or 74 RBIs, my apologies. Is a guy that could have an improving impact on this. Again, part of that Cleveland glutton of outfielders, a little bit older here, 23. So we should see some aggressive moves. He finished the year last year at double, probably going to start there, but could see a really quick progression to AAA. That's a strong possibility there. The last two guys in this one, Rainford Salinas is a guy that I'm not super interested in, Robbie. Yankees prospect, not a lot of great, movement here on the statistical side, but still young enough that there's some breakout that could kind of happen here a little bit after this. The last two guys on the list were late additions for me, Robbie. Luis Baez in Houston is a J2 guy from 22, a little bit older for the J2 class, 19-year-old, and definitely a guy to watch. We've seen this with Houston over the last couple of years.
I was just going to say that's their comfort zone. Yep.
Yeah, and if you watch any broadcast, they talk about it in nauseum, how Houston built their whole team with this type of guy. So a guy that I'm seeing as a riser. And the last guy on the list here is Rainer Arias in San Francisco, also a J2 guy, is slowly developing. I would say Arias is going to be on a lot more lists than you're going to see Baez right now, but Baez is probably the faster mover of the two of them right now. Arias has the hype a little bit. Baez hasn't broken through that ceiling yet, if you will.
All right. That's it.
Yeah, let us know if there's anybody that you think we missed. This is the guys that you probably have not heard of in a lot of your leagues. The guys that
or just don't care about yet, right?
Well, And I've loved the last couple rounds of the draft that we have live right now, Robbie, because everybody's picking just plugs and they're just like, this guy once had a couple good weeks. I'll throw him in there, see what happens. And I'm like, you guys are missing out on a crazy amount of value here in guys that are going to be around in a couple years, and you're just leaving them out there. So I think it's interesting, but I love this part of the draft. It's my favorite part of the draft, and it's probably where I do probably my best work, to be 100% honest. So I get excited about it.
It's always fun when you finish a draft with a queue that you would be happy to have rostered all of the players. You know, if you really put the time in to make like a 100+ man queue for a 15-round draft in your dynasty league, and like for this particular one, Ty and I are talking about, it's a universal. So MLB and prospect players, they just have to have a major league team association, and you're good to hire or good to draft them. But there are guys where I'm just looking at like a Texas Ranger guy, Daniel Mateo. Mato, just like I don't want him yet. Like I like him, but this isn't the league for him. You know, this isn't a 60-man minors league where you just want to bury a bunch of guys and then look at them in 3 years. But there's other guys like 3rd-round pick from the Nationals, Trey Lidscomb, who we talked about. He hasn't gone in this draft. I'm like, I like him, but I've got Austin Riley for the next 3 years. I'm not going to go jump the gun on a college guy right now. So you kind of draft in and around what suits you. But when it gets to the outfield, especially if you go left, if your league is left field, right field, center field, oh my gosh, it can be hard. And we used to rank that. We used to do a left field episode, a right field episode, a center field episode, and a few people were kind of like, "Hey, what's your outfield ranking?" And we're like, we don't have one. We've got left, right, center. So that's why this became a 3-part episode, was that we amalgamated left, right, and center into outfield. And I mean, if you have any questions, like Ty said, hit us up at DingersPod on the Twitter.
And wonderful, Robbie. And that's a great spot to leave it. We are through 3 straight episodes of Outfielders. It was a lot of outfielders, and looking forward to getting into the arms because everybody loves to get angry about pitching. So
my goodness, it's
do
the easiest to trigger.
That's right. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about some of these guys. No Marmazar, does he play the outfield?
Oh,
or is he a